Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 2A, class 29, and we're looking at assignment 40. Today is April 3rd, 2024. For those in Radioland, for some reason, Google has decided to sign me out. Not sure why it keeps doing this. I keep trying to fix it, but nothing I do seems to work. Hang on a second. Oh, and why is it doing that? Okay, come on. I think I've got it now. Hang on a sec, guys. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know why that keeps happening. What is that? Oh, hang on. Okay, hopefully that improves the sound. Does that work better? Okay, so this is OLC 40, term 2A, class 29, assignment 40. I apologize for the delay. Google signed me out just as I was trying to sign into the class. Okay, whenever you're handing work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Please include your full name, the course name, assignment number and name. If the assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label them both and include them both in the same email, because I often compare them and they often have slightly different marking schemes. If you're trying to reach me, Facebook or YouTube, capital G, capital PERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. You can also call in to the studio while I am taping, especially if you want to talk about an assignment that I'm working on, 1-800-465-7144. And you can call the office to talk to me about anything else, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, which happens a few times, please send it as an attachment. Don't send it directly in the body of the email. It's very hard to print off and doesn't quite show properly on the computer. Okay, today's work. Understand the difference between essential and non-essential elements in a sentence. Understand how to write and punctuate appositives. Understand how to write and punctuate essential and non-essential words, phrases, and clauses. Understand how to write a participle phrase. Understand how to make predictions. Reflect on a story and think about character relationships. Reflect on and explain what you liked or did not like about a relationship. Okay. So essential versus non-essential elements. Sometimes we add extra words, phrases, or clauses to a sentence to help add more information. When that information is necessary to understand the sentence, it's called essential. When that information is helpful but not absolutely necessary, then it is called non-essential. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to decide whether the information is essential or non-essential. We're going to review some common aspects of essential versus non-essential elements. And these elements can happen at the word, the phrase, or the clause level. If you leave out the element, or if you put it somewhere else in the sentence, does the essential meaning of the sentence change? If so, then it's essential. If it doesn't really change anything, it's a non-essential piece. So here's an example of a non-essential piece. The average world temperature, however, has continued to rise significantly. If you take out however, nothing changes about that sentence. The 6th century philosopher Boethius was arrested, tortured, and bludgeoned to death. Now, if I took out his name, the sentence wouldn't make as much sense because we wouldn't know which philosopher they were talking about. Non-essential. Company managers seeking higher profits hired temporary workers to replace full-time staff. Now, seeking higher profits is talking about their motive, but it doesn't really change anything about what they've done. So you could take that out and the sentence would still make sense. The person checking tickets at the counter asked for a form of identification. Now, if I just said the person asked for a form of identification, the first thing you'd say would be like, what person, who, what gives them the right to ask for something? So you really do have to have that information there. Non-essential, my uncle, who is 80 years old, walks 3 miles every day. So who is 80 years old is the clause. Now, that kind of is important in terms of, oh, wow, it's amazing. But my uncle walks 3 miles every day still makes sense without that information. Essential, the woman who interviewed you is my sister. So in this case, who interviewed you is identifying mark of who the woman is. Without it, you have no clue who they're talking about. And that's kind of the big thing is if it's non-essential, you could take it out and the sentence still makes sense. If it's essential, huge parts that you need to understand would be taken out. Okay, so there's different types of words, phrases, clauses that can be grouped in this way. And I'm just kind of giving you a few examples of some because it's kind of helpful to know when you see them and also to know when you're writing them. Appositives are one type of element that can be essential or non-essential. Appositives are a noun or a pronoun set next to another noun or pronoun that explain it or add further details to it. It might come before or after the noun it explains, although I find in practice we just tend to use whatever comes second tends to be thought of as the appositive, although technically it doesn't have to be. Dogs, man's best friend, work beside us in an astonishing number of occupations. Sorry, the word os got dropped. The first Canadian Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, was originally from Scotland. Okay. In both of these cases, these elements could have been taken out and the sentence still makes sense. An appositive can be a noun phrase, or a noun clause. The words most indestructible creatures, cockroaches, are widely loathed. The lead singer of the band, my friend, said we can come backstage after the show. The previous mayor, whose budget cutbacks caused this mess, is hated by many people. So here's our clause. That is the appositive. Here, my friend, and I've been looking at the part about cockroaches and thinking, I don't think it makes any sense without the word cockroaches. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what animal we're talking about. So it's still in a positive. It just doesn't need the commas around it. So like I said, it sometimes can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes positives are absolutely essential. You would not be able to understand. So example, the latest #1 song, Texas Hold'em, has caused a lot of controversy over what exactly constitutes a country song. Without the name of the song, readers might not know what song is being discussed because latest can be, it's kind of a general term, right? Do you mean like this week or do you mean like this month? When this happens, we don't put the commas around the appositive because it's essential. Another example, the popular US President John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. Again, there's been many popular US presidents. If we don't add John Kennedy, we don't know who we're talking about. Sorry, some of this is repetitive because I think I added some stuff at the last minute. Some examples would be things for non-essential things. My first dog, Duchess, was a black and white collie. I went to watch my favorite team, Detroit Red Wings, at Little Caesars Arena. Windsor, a border town, has a high rate of immigration. So I would say this definitely non-essential. This one, I'm not sure. I was thinking about this again. Maybe could it be essential? Because you don't even know what sport I'm talking about, right? Or what my favorite team might be. Maybe it's a baseball team. Duchess, no, definitely non-essential. Okay. Participle words and phrases are another example. A participle is a verb form that usually ends in ing or ed, but it's being used as an adjective in the sentence. Participles may be found in the same spot as many adjectives right before the noun. The crying baby was soothed by its mother. Even though crying is a verb, in this case, it's describing what the baby's doing. It's not the actual verb in the sentence. A squeaking mouse attracted the attention of the cat. The shuddering building collapsed into a pile of debris. So the placement of it in front of the subject is one hint that it's working as an adjective. It's not working as the verb in the sentence. A participle can also sometimes be the start of a phrase connected to nouns, pronouns, or modifiers. This may show up in multiple places in a sentence. However, it's really common to happen at the beginning. So for example, having taught for 20 years, comma, she was perfectly capable of instructing without a lesson plan. So having taught for 20 years is describing this person, she. Shaken to the core, the accident survivor could barely speak. Shaken to the core is describing how this accident survivor feels. Walking along the bridge, the little girl noticed something sparkly in the water. So again, walking along the bridge is describing what this little girl's doing at that time. Um, it's important to point out I couldn't just leave off the subject, and I also shouldn't put the subject too far away from that phrase. They're supposed to be close together, so it's obvious that that's what you're describing. Oh, okay, so here's an example. The girl wearing the bunny outfit is my girlfriend. Essential because otherwise you don't know who the girl is. The statue standing on the corner was built over 100 years ago. Again, essential. The school destroyed by fire is going to be rebuilt. Essential. The tree, swaying in the breeze, gave off a lovely scent of flowers. Non-essential. The toy train, chugging rhythmically along, fell off the broken bridge. Non-essential. Okay, moving on. We are on Unit 4. This is the last unit in this course. It's kind of a short one, but a lot of the assignments are sort of longer assignments. So the big focus on this unit is on kind of reviewing your reading strategies and your writing strategies and your literacy growth through the course. So by the end of this unit, you'll be able to write a summary on an author's biography, assemble a literacy portfolio that demonstrates your own growth, complete your ongoing literacy and reflection journal, write a multi-paragraph opinion essay on your own growth in reading and writing, complete your term-long reading log, demonstrate your understanding of a novel through close examination of the characters, identify reading strategies and skills, apply your reading strategies and skills to read a new text, research topics such as a career and scholarship money, and create an informational paragraph. Okay, so there are 5 lessons as always, but in this particular case, every lesson only really has one big assignment. Having said that, assignment 42 is split up into 3 parts. So for our upcoming one we did yesterday, we talked about the characters. And then today we're talking about the summary, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Today we're talking about characters. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the summary. Lesson 18, assignment 42 is about identifying resources and scholarship money. That we're probably going to split over 2 days because it has 3 kind of big parts. Lesson 19 is where you write your essay expressing an opinion about your own progress in the course. And then lesson 20 is where we put together your own literacy portfolio. There's no new writing there. You're just kind of gathering together your literacy pieces, which we'll talk about then. So that one isn't really too hard. It's worth 10% of your overall grade. And then we have the final exam or a culminating activity worth 20% of your overall grade. I know sometimes people are in a spot where they don't easily have someone who can proctor the exam and watch them, in which case I do have the culminating activity. It's more work, truthfully, but it can be done without anybody watching you because there's not really any chance of cheating because it's got a lot of writing in it. So if you have the opportunity, I would suggest writing the final exam because it's honestly a lot faster. It's about 2 hours and not quite as long. Okay, so this is our last unit of the course, almost done. And this little kitty cat is saying, wait, I'm almost done this. And she's trying to finish off the Rubik's Cube. Okay, so reading skills and strategies we've practiced: scanning for information, skimming nonfiction material to get an overview of it, locating specific information, making connections and predictions, summarizing different types of texts, retelling narrative events, stating an opinion on a text and supporting it with evidence, identifying story elements such as characters and setting, asking questions before, during, and after reading, and prioritizing information. Okay, so that was kind of the longer version. In your package, it talks about it this way. Before you read the text selection for this assignment, take a few minutes to think about the different reading strategies you have learned about in this course. Here are some keywords and phrases to help jog your memory and get you in a reading frame of mind. Directly stated information, indirectly stated information, making connections, skim, scan, identify, locate, predict, tell, list, in your opinion, and what would you do if? So at this point, you should be up to chapter 9, but you don't want to go beyond it. Assignment 40 is kind of a weird one because the first couple of questions you have to answer before you read the last 3 chapters. Then you've got to stop, read those chapters, and then you'll be able to answer the rest of the questions for assignment number 40. And I'm sorry, I don't like the setup. It would make much more sense to split it into 2 separate assignments, but this is how they set it up for us. Okay, so the first question, again, you haven't read the final 3 chapters, but you have read up to chapter 9 at this point. Before reading, take a moment to access your prior knowledge of the characters in the novel. Write a few words to describe what you know about these characters already. Jimmy, Teresa, Gary, Peter, Ms. Quintal, and Martha. Now, this is one of the few times where it does not matter if you write a full sentence, right? But I will say, make sure you describe their personality trait, not just who they are. Like Ms. Quintel is the teacher, but that doesn't really tell me anything about what she's like. So you would want to tell me, what is she like as a person? Okay. Again, we can't go beyond what you know. If by chance you've read ahead, I know some people have, don't use information that you have from the next 3 chapters, okay? Because they're pretty crucial. Make sure you do write a few words, not just one word. So here's an example. If I wrote some words about the Hulk, anger issues, can be violent, unpredictable, can be nice. So I've got some one-word things, some phrases. None of it has to be a full sentence. This is just kind of random ideas here. Number 2, beside each character name, write point form notes to show predictions about what you think will happen to or about each character listed. And again, it's the same people, Jimmy, Teresa, Gary, Peter, Ms. Quintal, and Martha. Martha's the grandma, just in case. It doesn't come up very often, but that's who Martha is. Remember, your predictions will be made based on what you know about the characters so far in the novel. So please don't read ahead and then give me predictions on what actually happens. Just give me predictions from your own brain, basically. So predictions are guessing about the future. If it's already a snowy day, then I can't make a prediction saying, oh, I think it'll snow today. It doesn't count as a prediction because it's already snowing. So by the same token, you can't mention things that have already happened to the characters up to chapter 9 because those don't count as predictions. They already happened. So I wouldn't talk about Jimmy coming home from juvenile detention because that happened way back in chapter 1. I want to think about what might happen in the future. What do you think might happen next in this novel to each of these characters? Essentially, you're making an educated guess about what might happen based on your own experiences, your knowledge of life and history, your knowledge of the book's genre, your knowledge of book plots and structures such as problems and solutions. Keep in mind, predictions do not need to be right, okay? Just reasonable. I don't mark you wrong if your prediction doesn't come true. I'm just looking to see that it makes sense. So let's say I was reading a completely different novel. It's written in a realistic genre, just like this one is. The main characters are young First Nations characters going out to high school for the first time in a big city. What would be some reasonable predictions for events that might happen in the story? Well, maybe I say students get lost when they get off the plane. That's a reasonable prediction because people often do get lost when they arrive somewhere new. Unreasonable prediction. Aliens come and kidnap them. Well, no, because this is a realistic novel and aliens don't really occur in the realism genre. Some other examples. Oh, hang on. One student is injured and killed, and the other students grieve. Yeah, that's reasonable because overcoming the grief might be the focus of the rest of the novel. I don't know yet, right? All the students are immediately killed in a car accident. No, that's not very reasonable because the plot wouldn't really kill off all the main characters at once right at the beginning of the story. That'd be weird. Student drops out due to poor grades. Yeah, that's reasonable. Students often do drop out with poor grades. Students run off and get married. No, that's not really reasonable because legally minors under 18 can't actually get married in real life. Students gradually go through personality changes as they meet various successes and failures at school. Yeah, that's reasonable because characters often do need time to change slowly, and plots for a novel generally need time to develop and for the characters to face problems. All of the students immediately become super competent and super successful instantly. Well, no, because that's not really how characters develop and it's not really how plots work. Again, it would be a very short story if everybody became successful instantly in the first chapter. There wouldn't be much else to say, would there? So make sure your predictions are reasonable, but they don't have to be correct. Okay. After you've finished making those predictions, then you need to stop and read the next 3 chapters of the novel before you can do the next questions in this assignment. Some of the upcoming questions actually involve checking on your predictions, so you need to finish the book in order to answer them correctly. So take a coffee break and come back when you've done the novel if you're watching this video after the fact, okay? Yep, and so you're going to be reading the next 3 chapters. Try to use all the reading skills that you've developed during this course, including accessing prior knowledge, which we just kind of talked about, skimming, scanning, reading the questions first so they guide your reading, which, hint, hint, we're about to do. Okay, so number 3 in assignment 40 is list the important events that Peter, remember Peter's the uncle, tells Ms. Quintal, which is the teacher, about Jimmy's past in point form too. So I want to point this out because sometimes I have people tell me this. This isn't about Jimmy going to juvenile detention, right? Miss Quintel already knows that he's been in detention. Peter is telling her some new information about Jimmy that she wasn't aware of from when he was younger. So things that she would have no way of knowing and that Jimmy probably doesn't talk about. Okay, so that comes up in one of the upcoming chapters. What is it exactly? Okay, number 4. Why does Peter think it is a good idea for Jimmy to participate in the healing circle? What does Jimmy think about it? 2, the 2 means it's worth 2 marks. So Peter and Jimmy don't necessarily have the exact same opinion on the healing center. What does Peter think about the healing center and why does he think it's going to be helpful? What does Jimmy think about the healing circle and why does he think that? Okay. So that should probably be at least 2 or 3 sentences. Okay. Number 5. Was your prediction for Gary accurate? Explain what you thought would happen and what actually does happen in the novel. Include your reaction to what happens in the novel in your answer. Were you surprised, upset, or did you just know it already? Again, 2 more marks. So first of all, go back to the predictions you made. Remember, we're talking about over here, and you made some sort of prediction for Gary. Whatever it is, tell me about it again. I know it seems repetitive, but go ahead and do it. Where am I? Okay. Now, tell me what actually happened in the book. Obviously, I know. The point is for you to demonstrate that you understand what actually happened. Then, how do you feel about what happened? What do you think about it? You could have an emotional reaction, like, oh, I feel bad that this happened, or I feel, uneasy, or you could have a reaction to the writing, like, oh, I didn't like that the writer did this because I felt like he should have done this instead. However you choose to respond, whether you're responding just to the event itself or whether you're responding to it as somebody kind of like a book critic in a sense, what do you think about Gary's choices or actions in the next 3 chapters? And what do you think about Jimmy's response to it? And again, a response doesn't just mean that Jimmy said something, right? Jimmy's response can be his actions, they can be his feelings, it can be decisions he makes in the aftermath of those things. So response, sometimes we're used to that just meaning like what he says. It doesn't just mean that, it means a much bigger idea, like how does Jimmy react after Gary's choices and actions? So number 6, on page 77 of the novel, Ms. Quintel shares something about her own personal life with Jimmy. What does she reveal? And why do you think she offers this private information to a student? 2 marks. Keep in mind, teachers are generally kind of discouraged from sharing private information with students. It's considered inappropriate because they don't want teachers and students to develop too close a relationship. So what was it that Miss Quintel shared, and why did she feel like it was so important that she had to share this information anyways? Why does she think it will be helpful? So it says 2 marks here. So I would make sure you had at least 2 or 3 sentences for this answer. What does she reveal? Why does she tell him? Okay, 31. Oh, sorry, 31 is the slide. Number 7 is the question. Complex relationships run throughout this novel. Choose one relationship in Jimmy Comes Home and comment on how or why it is complex. Make sure you name the people in the relationship. For example, Jimmy and Ms. Quintel or Jimmy and Teresa. And it doesn't have to include Jimmy, it can be anybody you want. But they do have to have a relationship with each other, right? Decide whether it is a good relationship or a bad one, and then use examples from the text to back up your opinion. And this is worth 3 marks. So I wanted to kind of talk about the part about complex relationships first, because I think it's an unusual word choice. So when I looked up in the dictionary, complex is an adjective, and it means having many parts related to each other in ways that might be difficult to understand. For example, a complex surgical procedure. Or in the sentence, the question of who is legally responsible is a complex issue. So we're looking for a relationship that has many different parts that relate to each other in ways that could be hard to understand. So a relationship might be considered simple. Simple would be the opposite of complex if the feelings are straightforward and the relationship is easy to understand. So two people who are clearly enemies, they're obviously enemies. That's easy to understand. People who are best friends, that's very easy to understand. True love, a romance, that's easy to understand. A mom who loves the son and the son loves the mom back. Those are all very simple relationships in that way. Okay. However, a relationship might be considered complex when the feelings that people have for each other are mixed. There's not just one type of emotion, there's more than one type of emotion. So, for example, maybe they're good friends, but there's been a big fight or a misunderstanding. Or two people are kind of like enemies, except they sort of understand why you don't like each other, and there's sort of some peace with the fact that you guys don't get along. Um, a relationship that's hard to describe and has a lot of history, both good and bad. So, which are some relationships in the novel that you would consider complex rather than simple? And then the other part of that question is it's talking about whether the relationship is good or bad. And obviously, there's going to be some subjective decision making about that, right? Because sometimes what one person thinks makes a relationship good and what another person thinks makes a relationship good can be different. But in general, I would say that a relationship is good if it helps the people involved. Does it make them happier? Does it make them healthier? Does it help them make better choices? Does it make them better people or kinder people or more stable people? Generally, if somebody says a relationship is bad, they mean that it hurts the people that are involved in it, right? Or sometimes hurts people around them, right? If you look at somebody like Bonnie and Clyde, they may have been very happy, but they were a lethal relationship because they went around killing everybody around them. Okay. So if it hurts the people involved, is it making them unhappier? Is it making them angrier? Does it cause them to make worse choices like get involved with drinking or drugs or gambling or things that are basically kind of tearing their lives apart? Does it make them worse people in some way? Meaner, less reliable, um, unable to work, that kind of thing. Do you consider the relationship that you've picked to talk about, is it considered a good relationship? or a bad relationship? And what are the reasons you think so? What are some things that you think show that it's good? And what are some things that you think show are bad? Remember, when we're doing writing about novels, we always back up our opinions with evidence from the text. So I think this relationship is good because this and this happened, or I think this relationship is bad because this and this happened in the book. Okay. That's called supporting your ideas with evidence. Okay, number 8. You've just finished reading book 1 of the Green Star Lake series. What did you think? Rate how you liked the book from 1, did not like it at all, to 10, loved it. Give at least 3 reasons for your rating. It has 3 here, which would mean 3 marks. To me, you would want to have at least 3 sentences. Occasionally, I will have somebody who does something like this. I loved the book because great characters, um, awesome action, and good ending. Okay. Yeah, there's kind of 3 reasons, but when we're saying 3 reasons for the rating, I'm expecting you to like tell me a sentence about the characters, tell me a sentence about the action, tell me a sentence about each one of your reasons that explains it in more detail. So don't kind of condense it all into one sentence, all right? Okay. Sometimes when you're thinking about a book, it's kind of so big, it can be hard to think about, well, what part of it do I look at? How could I talk about it? So some things that you might have loved or hated about the book, the characters, maybe you loved them, maybe you hated them, maybe you liked some of them and didn't like other ones. The plot of the story. Maybe you thought it was a really interesting plot. Maybe you thought it was a disappointing or stereotypical plot. Maybe you didn't like the ending. The genre. Genre is what type of book it is. I think we've talked about this before. Is it a realistic book? Is it fantasy, science fiction, romance, mystery, horror? Different people like different genres. For example, I don't really like realistic genre books. And in my own personal life, I don't generally read them. So just the fact that a genre is realistic might be kind of a put off for me on a book. By the same token, I don't like horror. So any book that's horror automatically has a strike against it just because I don't care about that particular genre. You may feel the same way, or you may love that kind of genre. So that might be part of what you loved or hated about a book. The overall message or theme of the book, that can be a big thing, right? Some books have very positive, uplifting themes. Some books can have very negative, sort of doomsday themes where they think everything's going crazy or everything's going bad and it's never going to get better. And sometimes that message can influence your own mood. And so you may have a preference for um, positive messages or negative messages, or maybe you like messages about love or like messages about the environment, whatever it is. So the message or the theme of the book may be something that was really important to you, whether you liked it or hated it. Dialogue. I gotta say, for me, I think great dialogue can really make or break a good book. But some people could care less about dialogue, right? And what people think is good in terms of dialogue, it can be very different, right? Some people might like lots of beautiful, long, lyrical monologues. Someone else might like smart, snappy, short, kind of comedic banter. Similarities between you and the characters or you and the events. Sometimes we really enjoy reading a book that kind of walks a character through events that we've been through. Or sometimes we may really enjoy reading about a character who is similar to us in some way, background or the kind of decisions they've made or the kind of situations they've been in. And the ending. I can read a whole book and love the whole book. And if the ending is terrible, I end up hating the whole book, right? By the same token, a book that's only so-so, if it has a really great ending, can kind of redeem itself and I can love it a whole lot more. So there may be some other things that you loved or hated about the book. Feel free to mention anything. It doesn't have to be one of these items I mentioned here. This is just kind of to get your ideas going. Okay, let's Okay. You can support support your opinion with evidence or details in the books. So one thing to think about is we've talked a lot about complex sentences, and complex sentences are where you have a dependent clause and an independent clause. Complex sentences are great sentences to use in this kind of situation because there's two parts. So you can say like, I liked this because, I loved this due to, I hated this since, I liked the part where, I liked when, I felt a connection to. I understood how the character feels because, oops, or I hate it, or I was disappointed. And you explain why, because, due to, since, all those kind of things. So here's an example, not of this book, but of a different book, of me explaining my ideas about the book, but I'm supporting them with details from the book. So, for example, I loved the character of Harry Potter because even though he was very powerful, he was still very kind. I'm going to add two other students. I enjoyed the world of magic, the owls as letter carriers, wands made from various items, unicorns in the forest, mermaids under the sea, and terrifying dragons. I also liked the theme of friendship between Harry, Hermione, and Ron Weasley. They always used their talents to help each other when they faced danger. So I liked the character because that he was kind. I liked the world of magic. That's kind of the genre. And I gave some examples of parts of the genre that I really liked, the unicorns, the mermaids, the dragons. I liked the theme and I explained what I felt the theme was and what I liked about it. Okay. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I'm saying support your ideas with evidence from the text. Now, it is perfectly fine to also write about why you hated the book. So I'm giving you an example here. I don't know if you ever had to read Catcher in the Rye. It's a book that everybody had to read back in the day in high school. And I got to say, I honestly, I hated the book so much. And so this is a little essay about why I hated Catcher in the Rye. I hated the book Catcher in the Rye for a lot of reasons. For one thing, I really didn't like the main character, Holden. And unfortunately, when I don't like the main character, I don't really enjoy reading the book since I don't care what happens about him. His cynicism and anger is just as off-putting in the novel as it would be in real life. The writer uses the technique of an unreliable narrator, which I don't generally find compelling to read. I don't want to second guess the narration constantly, as it feels like the writer is out to trick you. The book just seems depressing to me. I tend to read books to escape from the tedium of real life. So a book that attempts to mimic the boredom of real life doesn't really have any appeal to me. Overall, there were just too many negatives to make this book enjoyable to read. So maybe you didn't like the book Jimmy Comes Home. That's totally fine, but I need you to stop and think about what were the things that you didn't like about it and explain examples in the book that support what you're saying. Like, I thought it was depressing. Here's an example of what was depressing, right? I didn't like the character because he was always angry, for example, when he says this or that. Those are some examples of how you can do that. Okay. And ooh, for some reason, this class always goes so much faster than my morning class. I think I just talk faster in this class. Okay. Before you hand in this assignment, please make sure to check it over. Look for, have you answered each item in a complete sentence rather than a one-word answer? Okay, this is super important. A one-word answer just is not going to get you the marks you need, okay? Have you written at least the number of sentences it asks for? Generally, I would look at how many marks it's worth. So something that's worth 2 marks probably needs 2 sentences. If it's worth 4 or 5 marks, it probably needs 4 or 5 sentences. It's really important to look at. Have you labeled each question with its letter so I know which question you're answering? A lot of times when the assignments get handed in to me, they can get jumbled up in the whole process. And if you don't label them, I've got to kind of guess a little bit as to which question you're answering. And I always find it very frustrating because I'm never sure, am I guessing right? So it's really important when you're doing this, write down A or B or whatever right next to it. The other thing is, if you can, leave a little bit of space between your questions, because that way I've got some room to make some comments about what to do or what to fix or whatever, right? Please make sure each sentence starts with a capital letter. That is a basic, every single sentence has to have a capital letter. Please make sure every sentence ends with a period. Again, we're not really going to be using exclamation points or question marks for this kind of stuff. If you're handwriting stuff, can you please check and make sure your handwriting is legible? Legible means that it's neat and that it can be read. Also, can you make sure that it's dark enough? Okay. Especially if you are writing with a pencil. Okay. If it's possible to write with a blue or a black pen that's nice and dark, that would be really, really helpful, because remember that you're often taking a picture of this and then you're attaching the picture and then it's coming to us and we're downloading it and then we're printing it off. So as it goes through each one of those stages, I find that the writing assignments become very light. And so sometimes if you've written in pencil, I can have a really hard time seeing all the words, and then it's really hard to know how to mark things when I can't read your exact words. So even if you need to kind of go over it and trace it again a little bit darker so that I can see it, or write with like a fatter pencil, maybe, that would be really helpful. Obviously, if you are able to type write the answers, that's great. I know not everybody can or not everybody's comfortable typing. It is very easy to read, though, if you choose to do it that way. All right, I don't think there's anything else to talk about in assignment 40. I just wanted to encourage you. I know we're getting near the end of this course. This little course says it's a little meme says it's Thursday, and I've crossed it off. It's Wednesday. We are almost there, people. We only have one more class for this week. And at that point, we really only have about 2 or 3 more assignments left. So if you've gotten this far, don't worry, you will be able to get this done. If at any point you are beginning to feel nervous, or you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, by all means call me. And keep in mind, it is possible to do, you know, 90% of these assignments and maybe skip 1 or 2 that you find really hard and still be able to pass this course, right? Nothing terrible happens. You still need the marks, obviously, and you can't do that very often. But if you get to a really tough one that you just can't figure out and you're stuck on it, it's okay to just kind of write me and say, hey, I'm going to skip this one, Jill, and I will come back to this later if I've got time and energy. And if not, maybe this one just might stay skipped. Okay. Are there any questions before I leave? Okay. I'm never even sure how anybody would show me that. Okay. All right. So if there were, I suppose you could type questions there, because I'm not super familiar with Zoom, so I apologize. All right, I am really pleased by how many assignments I'm getting in. And if you're listening today, I can't wait to see all your assignments and hopefully be able to give this credit and maybe even get to see people graduate. I'm really looking forward to that part of this job. Thank you so much for showing up today. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow about assignment 41. Thank you.